So we will be recording this session. And thank you all for joining us today. Seems like every time we take a pause, it's more people come in. So while we're waiting, if you want to put down who you are and where you're from in the chat, or where you're from in the chat, I guess we could see who you are. We'll be asking some questions late in a couple minutes about what your role is across the campuses. But if you're from Stony Brook or if you're from another university, we would love to know. And we will be watching the chat. Ooh, Northern Iowa. It must be colder there than it is here, which I think it's cold here. Or Michigan. Hi, Sue Geneseo. Nice. Columbia, Michigan, Stony Brook. Nursing, Iowa times 3. Hi, Sam.
Hi.
All right, we'll get started. It's being recorded, so we can send it out. So Jenny's going to share our slides. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time here today, and we really appreciate our panel of students today. Thank you so much. So we'd first like to thank our panelists, and we'll introduce them in just a minute. We'd also like to thank our Amy Cook, the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs, and of course, all of our attendees, and everyone's coming in, so this is really exciting. So just a bit of housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted at all times. We will have time, hopefully, for some questions in the end. And again, you can put any questions you want in the chat. Anything we don't get to today, we'll follow up with. Please turn off your video if that's okay, just because we are expecting quite a few people today. We want to make sure that it's a smooth transmission. Please use the chat to ask questions, and please feel free to answer questions in the chat too. I know that every time I'm in an AI session, there's a lot of very, very interesting chat back and forth. So please feel free to do that. And we'll share any resources that are shared in the chat afterwards to all the participants. Please be respectful. And as you know, this session will be recorded. And our panelists are here today. We have Brandon Benarsi. He's a graduate in an electrical engineering major. Thank you. We'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves in a minute. Nishta Bogra, a junior in journalism major. Shorn Irfan, sophomore in computer science and applied mathematics major, and also the AI community president. And Mohammed Saban, junior in applied mathematics and economics. If you've just come in, you could put where you're from in the chat. That would be great. And as you do that, we are going to launch our first poll. Can everyone see the poll? So please put down what your role is: faculty, staff, undergraduate student, graduate student, or other. We'll give everyone a minute to fill that out. We have some students in the house. We're really excited about that, besides our panelists. Awesome. So we're really close. So I'll just end our poll and I'll share it just so everyone can see. We have a good percentage of faculty and staff, and then we have some graduate and undergraduate students. So thank you. And now we have one more poll. Let me see. And the next poll is, how have you used generative AI? And this could be for the faculties and students, obviously on both ends. Have you used it for class, research, personal use, coding, images, other? And if there's other, I'd love to hear about it in the chat. What else do you use it for? And I know there's tons of AI programs out there. Every day we learn more exciting things. And I'm joined here by, Jenny Zhang, who is one of our instructional designers here in CELT. Awesome, instructional designer. Oh, sorry, I guess I'm watching the chat and I stopped watching the poll. Just keep that open for one more minute. Okay, I'll end the poll and I'll share the results. Thank you, Kim. So everyone can see the results? Okay, personal use, that's great. I have not really used it for personal use, so I'm excited to hear, always excited to hear how people are using it across the board. We do have quite a bit of academic use and some academic research, and then again, some other academic administration. I know a lot of multiple options. Thank you, Phil. That's actually would have been a good idea. You can always put what else in the chat if you'd like. Yes, it is okay to say you have not, you've made a deliberate decision not to use these tools as well. Okay. So we're gonna start, even though people are still coming in. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go around and we'd like our students to introduce themselves. Who you are. We said your major, but definitely share your major again and why are you interested in generative AI? Brandon, you're first on my screen, so I'm gonna ask you to start.
Yeah, that's fine. Hi guys. I'm Brandon. I'm a second year PhD student in electrical engineering, and I'm kind of interested in AI and the topic of the discussion for AI because I can't yet really see how it's going to be used in a hardware level for like my field because I mean, there's not much that I know that it can do yet aside from like decision making or part picking. It can't really replicate anything. So I'm excited to see like what's next for Gen AI in EE.
I'm muted. Sean?
Oh, hi. My name is Sean. I'm a second year student studying computer science applied maths at Stony Brook. I'm also like the AI community president at Stony Brook, so I run one of the clubs here on campus. I'm mostly interested in AI because I feel like it's improved a lot over the last few years. Like you could see a lot of changes happening from like ChatGPT to GPT-4 or like DALL-E 2 to DALL-E 3. So I think it has potential to be really useful in the future. So I'm kind of excited to see what's to come there.
Thank you, Sean. Nishta, you're next on my list or my boxes.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Nishta. I'm a journalism major, a third year. I'm also in the Scholars for Medicine program at Stony Brook, so I'll be going to med school after this as well. And my experience with AI has largely been in the classroom, specifically as a journalism major. Our professors have started encouraging it, so I'm curious to see how it'll play an integral role in a lot of different careers between journalism and medicine.
Thank you. And Mohammed?
Hi everybody. I'm a junior studying applied math, statistics, and economics, and I'm interested in generative AI because I used extensively in my previous internship for coding, and we were like my team was building like an AI bot with the IT to do like actuarial reserving. So I would just want to see like how it used in the insurance industry.
Thank you. So the first real question here, we're going to go around, is what generative AI products have you used and what are your thoughts on them? Are they helpful? And if so, in what ways? Someone wants to jump in first, otherwise I'll choose. Oh, hi, we're doing the panel. We have a panel of students.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I had a question. That's
Oh,
all.
you have a question? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wondered if this was a class that you're setting up only for students, or are other people welcome to?
This panel?
No, the class that's here.
Oh, these are just students from across the university.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll say, what generative AI products have you used and what are your thoughts on them? Are they helpful? And if so, in what ways?
I'll answer that.
Good, thanks.
So I used ChatGPT a lot in my previous internship because I was required to code in VB and I didn't know like if that was the language. But my manager was like a busy woman, so she didn't really have time to like, teach me. But I used ChatGPT to really like understand how actually code works because ChatGPT can like, break down line by line and tells you how each system works, and that's really helpful for me because I had to do a lot of projects that involved VBA.
Thanks, Mohammed. Have you used any other tools along the way?
I've used Bard, but Bard doesn't really explain stuff the way ChatGPT does.
And you're using 3.5 or 4.0?
I think it was 3.5, the free version.
New version. Excellent.
There's a question about what is VBA.
Oh,
It's a programming language built into like Microsoft tools, PowerPoint, Word, and Excel. So if let's say if you want to do some repetitive tasks that require you to do like 16 Excel workbooks, you can just write a code and it would do it for you in Excel.
all right. Nishta, I'm actually going to ask you to go next because I think there's also a question in the chat that may be of most relation to, most applicable to you.
Yes, I saw that. So the question was, is there a fear that generative AI will turn truth to truthiness when it comes to news and media? This is something we've been studying heavily as journalism majors. Something that ChatGPT has started doing is it feels very compelled to give an answer, whether or not it's the right answer. And this is like not all the time, but a lot of times it'll come across that it'll make up parts of a story to try to complete a story just so it can give a strong answer rather than doing the proper research and giving everything. So what we've been taught and what I encourage everybody to do is to take what ChatGPT says with a grain of salt. What I have mainly used it for is ideation. So ChatGPT is a good place to find the ideas, but everything else should be done with the human research and backing. That being said, as ChatGPT comes out with newer versions and other generative AIs come out, I'm sure they will improve the accuracy. And by the time, at least our age, I'm an undergraduate, so by the time we enter our careers, I'm sure it'll definitely have improved to have a more accurate standard. But for now, that's the kind of approach that I've been taking.
Thank you. Have you used any other tools? Any other?
So I'm also, as a pre-med, I'm also part of a research program in biomedical informatics. And we've been slowly introduced to this tool. I forgot the name, I can get back to you with that. That uses generative AI to kind of map different tumor cells, different slides and like images of the human body. And the generative AI basically maps it, categorizes it, things that would have taken a lot of effort on the human front, things that I've done as like just like grunt work. The generative AI is able to do that now. So I'll get back to you with that program, but that's something really interesting that's starting to come to the forefront.
Thank you. Sean, you're this way on my box.
Okay, yeah. So I use ChatGPT like all the time. Like recently I had like an exam. So one of the things I did was ask it to create some practice problems for me. So it was like creating, and I was like saying, oh, this is too easy, or this is too hard. So yeah, ChatGPT is pretty good at creating practice problems. I also asked it to like explain some concepts to me that I don't really understand, like different programming concepts, or just like how to get started on a project. And I've also like found it helpful for like things like that could use like a basic Google search, but like if to avoid all the fluff and like complicated things, ChatGPT just explains it simpler in my opinion. But yeah, it does take like a certain amount of knowledge to understand when ChatGPT is telling you something that's completely wrong, because I have had experiences with that. Besides ChatGPT, I've also used DALL-E a little bit, mostly just for fun though. Like I asked it to like, create some cool pictures. I've asked it to create a profile picture for me once. I thought it was pretty cool.
And just maybe quick, what is Dolly as compared to ChatGPT?
DALL-E's like DALL-E's also made by the same company, OpenAI, but it's used more for creating images. So like you give it a prompt, so like create an oil painting of a person on a barn, and then it does it for you. While ChatGPT asks to like create text instead.
Thank you. And Brandon?
Yeah, so oh, my light went off. I've used the Snapchat AI. They have an AI there, and I've also used an image AI on Canva and Bing. They were free. The image ones, they have this weird thing where I have to be super specific about what I want, and they're still not able to kind of capture the image that's in my head. So in that way, I would say like it was useless. But also to touch on what Sean and Nisha said, I've used the Snapchat AI, and I have colleagues who've used ChatGPT when we're looking for like a certain operational amplifier for EE that has like these certain parameters. And then the AI would kind of, I guess, hallucinate and say, like, oh yeah, Open Semi would create this chip and the part number is here. And then we'd look it up and the part just doesn't exist. So in that sense, it's also useless, but that's just my experience with the AI so far.
Can you briefly say what hallucinate is for anyone who might not know?
I'm sorry.
Can you briefly tell us what hallucinate means for anyone who might not know?
Yeah, I guess it would say so the AI is, as Nisha said, compelled to provide an answer. So the answer wouldn't be something truth. It would just be something that would be created on the spot so that the user gets an answer. And I guess that's the vague definition of AI hallucinating. It's just creating something that's not there.
Thank you, Brandon. We have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to throw a question in here from the chat as and then we'll go back to some of our questions that we have on our list. How worried are you? I mean, overall, I'd like to know if you think it's scary or exciting. I think a lot of you, I want to know about that, but how worried are you that tools like ChatGPT will encourage the unsuspecting, busy, stressed, and unmotivated student, which is not everyone, to bypass learning?
So this is actually one of the reasons that I never used ChatGPT, I think, before this year. As someone earlier had talked about, ChatGPT is now built into a lot of platforms like Snapchat, Bing, Canva. I use Notion. So every time I was typing my essays on Notion, it would suggest like, oh, don't you want to use AI to finish the sentence? But for a long time, I was very much against it because I was worried that it would turn me into someone who's not as creative, or I'd be very reliant on ChatGPT to come up with things to say or come up with ideas without challenging myself. So hi, Professor Sherman, I've actually had him before. That's something I was extremely stressed about, even as someone who is motivated and always wants to write my own things. And I found myself relying a little more heavily on it, which is a little scary. So for example, for journalism projects or essays, we were assigned a general topic and I would ask ChatGPT to outline it for me because I personally had writer's block where I couldn't think of what to say next, which makes me a more effective writer and a more effective worker, but it does decrease the creativity level a little bit, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any of our other students want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think she said it really well. Like I've seen some students who are kind of like ChatGPT addicts. I try not to use it that much for things that are like academic, or just like I try to avoid it at all costs. But like I usually just use it for like when I'm stuck on something instead of like I don't want it to tell me I don't want it to give me the whole thing because I want to learn. But like if I'm stuck on say like a specific problem, like I have no ideas, I could probably ask ChatGPT to guide me in the right direction. So I'd rather use it to like learn than get the answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Brandon and Mohammed, anything
Yeah,
else to add?
I'd like to touch on that also. I mean, so AI can be used as a personal tutor if you wanted it to be that assistant for you. So like it can help you create an outline or just have that start to approach a problem. I think students are a lot lazier than that. If the tool can give you an answer and you don't have that motivation to actually learn, you just want to pass or your priorities are different, then yeah, absolutely they're gonna, I mean, even before AI, they would just do a quick Google search or Chegg or something of that sort. So now everything's at their fingertips, of course. I think it'll be used to just do the dirty work for them.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah.
So I have to like comment on that, but I use like it's a different AI tool. It's called Mindgrasp. It's paid. It basically, I think that tool is very helpful when it comes to like summarizing the slides. Because for my courses, I have like hundred of slides that needs to be read. So it just kind of like summarize and give you the big picture. So it's kind of easy for me to when I go and look at the problems to kind of have the big picture. So I think that's pretty helpful when it comes to like AI and like editing my papers. Like I use that to edit my papers to check for grammar and like conciseness. And I think that's really helpful when it comes to like AI. But that's only the paid version that I have. ChatGPT doesn't really edit like your paper and like doesn't make sure that you cite it like in the right format. Like I've used like ASA format for my sociology class, so I think MindGraphs does like a pretty good job in like make sure you're like citing the right text and like the way you cite it.
Thanks, Mohammed. Can you share that link in the that what you were talking about in the chat?
Oh yeah, I will share the link.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. To what extent should students or faculty use generative AI without it crossing into ethical or equity issues? And then I guess as a follow-up question, how can students and faculty be transparent in their use? And I see Jenny's going to put it in the chat for us. Thank you, Jenny. Who wants to start with that? We're talking about ethical or equity issues. Have you found any ethical issues? Have you seen any biases in your use of the products?
I guess I could start. So I think that students and faculty should not be using generative AI to a point where they're not learning what they're intended to be learning. So if you're like using AI to like completely do an assignment for you, then that would be an issue because then you're kind of just not learning anything. Yeah, so I think that it is possible to use ChatGPT in a way that gets you to learn. Like maybe instead of giving you the answer, it could give you the thought process. And also for like regarding equity, I think that like faculty should be aware that students have different access to like different tools. Because for example, some students have GPT-4 paid for, some of them don't. So yeah, I think that's my opinion.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, especially the point where we shouldn't be using it to the extent of it hindering our own learning. Something I've learned recently just from my peers and from my classmates is that a lot of times when people, for example, let's say you have a book report due, and you have just a day to do it and you never read the book. So there's a lot of different ways a student could approach it. They could, skim it and find a way to write something. A lot of times, they'll find some other outlet to get their information. What ChatGPT does that's helpful in that kind of situation is gives you a summary, or it gives you like a more condensed version of what your assignment is on. So for a student who's in that situation, there are some cases where ChatGPT actually encourages them to at least learn as much as they can from the book rather than writing the report on just the first 5 pages because that's all they got to. So it's a complicated line where you can use ChatGPT to help you complete assignments, which completing assignments in turn helps you learn. However, like Sean said, it can get to a point where when someone is completely reliant on it, they start lacking the skills to plan ahead. They start lacking the skills to actually read the entire book in this particular example. So yeah, and that is academic dishonesty, to try to find other outlets to do it. And a lot of times those people get caught for it, and that's a good thing. I'm thinking more on the terms of, for example, I've seen where students aren't able to get through the whole book, so they only read the first however many pages and write the entire report on that, which you're not getting everything you can out of that book at that point. So it's a really tricky question, and that's where it crosses into an ethical line, where you're starting to use ChatGPT to get around doing something that you're supposed to do.
Thank you. Brandon and Mohammed?
Yeah. So actually early like late high school, early college, I have used Khan Academy just to help with my work, and I actually saw that they're introducing this AI called Khanmigo, which is supposed to be like a personal tutor, and it's actually specifically designed so that if the student is stuck on a question and you ask the AI will be trained to kind of rephrase the question or give them information in different ways, but it's specifically designed not to reveal the answer. Um, and I don't know how they do it, or I don't know much about that technology, but I do know if a system like that kind of existed in school, where we can use a version of AI that's for university that um, it can summarize a book or it can give us the pointers of 100 slides, but then it won't actually spell something out or do the work for us, then that would probably erase those ethical possibilities. But yeah, the other thing with transparency, I feel like now as things are, there's still a lack of transparency between professor and student and that relationship. So I don't really see how we can even talk about transparency for AI if some of these issues aren't even resolved yet.
Thank you, Brandon. I want to go back to something you said before. You said that you used Dolly or an image, right? An image, and you said you have sometimes you put in the prompt, but it's not giving you what you think it's giving you. Is there any example that you would like to share about that? Are there any
Oh,
ethical or biases that you see when you do that?
sure. Well, I had used that for a personal reason. Like I had this idea about just in my head, let's say like a character is lifting weights, but instead of it being weights, it would be like the axle of a car and there's two wheels on the side. So I typed that in specifically and listed it out, and then the image I got back was like a car with arms lifting another car, and I don't know, it just didn't make sense. But I mean, uh I didn't use that for anything academic related. I'm sure if I was in a abstract art class, I probably would do well with that image, but yeah, that's that's my example. It's kind of unrelated.
Thank you, Brandon. Mohammed, did you have anything to add about to what extent should students or faculty use generative AI without crossing into ethical or equity issues?
I think when I asked my sociology professor like if I can use AI to like generate ideas or like outline of the assignment, and she was pretty okay with it. She was like, as long as you like don't copy word for word and you just take the idea and put it in your own words and use it to like edit the paper, you are good. So I think it's important to being transparent with your professor, because especially in like sociology or any other class that's like more writing heavy, you can use it to for yourself, and it's really helpful because sometimes you hit a writer block, you can't really think of anything, so it just gives you the idea and you just expand upon it.
Thanks, Mohammed. And a question came up in the chat that I'm going to ask you guys to, I guess, kind of a piggyback. How explicit do you think instructors should be about how to use these tools to support learning? Right now, it seems like there are a lot of student peer-to-peer discussions of AI, but not necessarily a lot of guidance from instructors. And I mean, if you guys have any examples of it being used well in the class, or an example that you would have modified so that it was better, you definitely share. How explicit do you think instructors should be about how to use these tools to support learning? Like Mohammed went up to his instructor and asked, but do you think you should have some additional information in the syllabus? How for every single assignment, do you think there should be additional information?
I think the professor should include it in the syllabus and be like, yeah, this is the criteria of how like far you can go with AI and not copying without like violating the university guidelines for academic dishonesty. I think every instructor like that has like a more writing heavy class should include it in their syllabus. And if it's not, I think student who like wants to use AI should ask their professor if the professor is okay with it.
Thanks, Mohammed. Yep, Lisa.
My personal solution, or I guess my personal mindset, that I think most of my professors agree with is to use ChatGPT, but don't let it replace everything. So for example, when you're writing essays, all of us have been taught that you have to cite your work. That's like a must. And since ChatGPT doesn't provide links or like resources or original articles for you, it's hard to take that information and put in your work without citing it. So I've only ever used ChatGPT for things that I wouldn't have to cite. For example, give me an example. Like I would ask ChatGPT to give me a topic that's related to health that I can write an article on. And I'd use that topic to write the article. That's not something you have to cite because that's something you could have gotten from a friend or anything else. So that's my personal boundary. And I think a lot of my professors have adopted that. However, I think it's also, just like Mohammed said, important to put in the syllabus because especially when it comes to academic dishonesty, there are a lot of different guidelines for different classes. So for example, like for some bio classes, it's if you violate academic dishonesty once, you get an F in the class. While for some other classes, it's if you violate it once, you get a warning. Second time, you get a 0. Third time, you get an F. And so because the guidelines are so different across different classes, I think it's important for the professor to make clear what consequences would, or not necessarily what consequences would be there, but like what the line is for them and what consequences would be there after that line is crossed.
Thank you. Brandon and Sean, but I'll just mention in the chat, Nathan is asking if would an icon system that labeled each assignment be useful? And Cheryl says she uses little robot emoji. I think that's adorable. I think that's great. But you guys can definitely comment on that as well. And the other question, you know, how explicit do you think instructors should be about using AI? If you have any other comments.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add, but yeah, I think they should be really clear about how much is allowed. Like I'm taking a creative writing class, like my professor said, you could use it for ideas, but don't use it to like write the paper for you. So yeah, that's helpful to know.
Good.
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations about these writing heavy courses, unfortunately, I haven't had much experience in those courses. Most of my courses are, I would say, formula heavy. And I think that if something could be open book, then I don't see why there would be a restriction on like AI since it could just be used as a tool. Because you can't really replicate a formula without it being uh like sitting on top of a set of foundation, and then that foundation goes deeper and deeper, and then in my coursework at least you have to show your work at all times. So then at least in that form I don't see where there could be any restrictions on AI. But pointing towards the icon system, I do know that at least for the images there are embedded watermarks that AI would have on their work. So if there's a way to kind of implement that and everything, and then for the institution side to see that watermark and know what's generated and what isn't, then maybe that could just alleviate these restrictions.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay. How can students and educators collaborate to harness the power of generative AI effectively? How can students and educators collaborate to harness the power of generative AI effectively?
And I think it is possible to like use generative AI in a way that promotes learning. Like for example, like I was just like thinking of some ideas, like maybe creating a like ChatGPT has a knowledge cutoff. I think it's like 2021. So maybe in an assignment could be to write about something that happened more recently that isn't part of the cutoff. And then maybe like use ChatGPT to help guide you along the way. Because that would require having some knowledge on the topic to like guide ChatGPT, and you would have to be aware of like whether what it's saying is nonsense or not. So yeah, I think there are ways to do it, or maybe for like an art class, like ask Dali. So yeah, there's definitely ways to do that.
Thanks, Sean. Who I'm sure I've heard it from actually someone in this panel that you don't have to worry about generative AI taking your job. You have to worry about the person who can use generative AI program effectively taking over your job. It's said much more pithy than that, but
I think for this question, like I can think of like last semester when I took like a theater class, and for one of the project we have to find like images.
mhm.
And I think it was really helpful. The professor actually encouraged us to use like ChatGPT to create images prompts and to write about it. But he was like, just get your ideas and like write it in your own words. So I think that's really like helpful. And he had a statement of AI in the syllabus. He was pretty open. Like he wanted to know like if you used AI or not, because he said that if you don't like cite OpenAI or ChatGPT as your source, then it's an academic dishonesty. But if you tell me that you used it, then it's not. So I think that was pretty interesting to see.
Thank you. Who else? How can students and educators collaborate to harness the power of generative AI effectively?
Yeah, I think that if there needs to be more discussion with like faculty and students. And I think if we can harvest or replicate this learn language model and create a tool that could just be like an institutional level TA where they can work for all of the students. So all the students have this personal tutor, this teaching assistant, and then the professor also has the aid that'll help them grade, it'll help them rephrase their course material in a way that the students can better understand. Or I think somebody mentioned how it helps their lecturers be more empathetic or just speak to the student a different way. I guess if we can just replicate teaching assistants through this AI model, then that would be a way to harness this power effectively.
Thanks, Brandon. Let me throw out another question. We talk about transparency one way, that you guys are telling your faculty, what you're doing, or what, the faculty are telling you what you can or cannot do. Do you think faculty are using it in their preparation, and how transparent do you think they should be about it to students? Do you think your faculty are using it in their prep?
I personally don't think my professors are using it to prep. I feel like if they did, the content would probably be a little bit more updated,
Okay.
or it's like because I mean I know it's the same slides that have been shared around for years. But I think using AI in the classroom is a two-way street. I think if this entire homework assignment or exam or practice problems or writing prompt or whatever it is created using AI, then the professor should let that be known, so that the students know to take everything with a grain of salt. Because the same way that a professor could create a homework assignment and have there be multiple errors, yet they're an expert in the subject matter, then we can't allow our students to believe that the homework generated by an AI is completely accurate either. So then them knowing where it came from kind of helps them approach it differently.
Thank you, Brandon.
I'm also not really, I'm like not really sure about professors, but like for me, I've personally used it to like help teach because as a like I'm the AI community president, so a lot of times I've like prepared slides on like different topics in AI. So I'm using AI to help me teach about AI, which is a little fun, but yeah, and also like a TA for a class, I've like used it to help me like explain the thought process behind certain problems. So yeah, it's been helping me prepare for my teaching experience.
Thanks, Sean. And just there's another question in there. And if an assignment was created by AI and then vetted by a professor, would you receive that differently than just an assignment with a notation that an assignment was created by AI?
I think I would do that. I would just take it as just if the professor wrote it. I wouldn't think that my professor used AI for it because I feel like the professor is just like an expert in their field. They don't really need to use AI because they know what they're talking about. It's just the students who have that knowledge barrier. So
Mhm.
they use AI to like better understand stuff. Like I've used AI in my economics course to like explain stuff like that's on my slides like even better with like few example. Like I used it on my midterm and I think that helped me a lot. Did really well on that midterm because I post all of my slides in like chat in mind grasp and be like create a quiz on a difficulty level like 10, so like the slides questions were on a difficulty level and I would do the problems over again and again, and I think that's already helped me to like get the good understanding of the material.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else?
I think my field, like a lot of my journalism classes, they don't necessarily use I personally don't think they do. I don't know. But I don't think they use AI to write their assignments because a lot of the assignments are very real world focused. Things that my professors who have previously been journalists are just trying to get across to us as students. Additionally, even if they were, I personally wouldn't be too bothered by it because what I find valuable about assignments are the feedback that the professor gives. So as long as the grading is still done by the professor and as long as they're giving their true input and comments, that is way more valuable to me than who wrote the prompt itself. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. All right. What do you think the future holds in the field of AI and education? Where are we going with this? What's going to happen by the time, you're graduated and the next group are in here? Or maybe next semester, who knows? It's going so quickly. What do you think the future holds in the field of AI and education? What do we have to look forward to, or what do we have to be, I guess, positively or negatively?
I think it will definitely depend on the student because like there's ways to use AI to learn and ways to use AI to cheat. And as these AIs get better, I think that both of those are going to become easier to do. So well, I guess students will have to work harder to make sure that they don't cheat because it's going to be a lot more tempting as it gets easier. But yeah, I think it could be a really good learning tool because like AI, you could message at like any time while a teacher might not always be available to email. So yeah.
I think applications for AI can be beneficial in certain ways. So something that I've seen, at least in the writing industry and the books industry, is some newsrooms using AI to cover things like minor things so that they don't have to pay for staff to do those things. So for example, covering a sports game, what the scores were and how it turned out. That's something that's very straightforward and you have to kind of research and put into words by itself. However, if any of you have seen those kinds of articles, they are very like a little too concise. Like they don't necessarily encapsulate the emotions and feelings of watching a sports game in a piece of writing. So something that I'm worried about losing using AI is a human element, and that doesn't necessarily apply to every field, but at least to writing and journalism and things that have to do with that area. Having a human voice behind it, even though it's written down, makes a huge difference. Anyone who studies English or anyone who's even read two pieces of work, one by AI, one by a human, can see the difference. I'll put like an example in the chat of an article so you guys can take your own take on it. But I'm really worried about losing the human element, having a human to human connection, even if it's across a large platform on a news site or something along those lines.
Thank you. And we have a follow-up question, but go ahead, Brandon. No, go ahead. I want to cover this
Okay.
question first.
Well, so I think in the immediate future, there's going to be a lot more cheating and a lot more tools that are designed to catch cheating in education. I think that's where AI is heading right now because the technology is so young. I do want to talk about this message in the chat. If we're worried about
Hmm.
you're doing the hard work to get credit, I'm worried about that now. I see like there are times where the proctor steps out or this proctor is looking down answering a question during an exam, and then these three kids in the back of the room are discussing their answers, and I'm putting in the hard work to get the credit. If AI was to replace that, then I feel a lot more worried because we'll be getting the same credit for the same course, and then that'll carry out throughout undergrad or graduate, and then in the workforce it'll still be translated where I'll we will have, for example, electrical engineers in industry that are actually just ChatGPT experts, and I don't know how that'll translate later down the line.
Mm.
So yeah, I guess it kind of does worry me that I'll be putting in the hard work to get the credit.
Thank you, Brandon. And if anyone else, actually, we were going to ask that question next because that's a good one.
For me, it does bother me to like see other students like cheating, like using AI to like get answers to things. But I think that's more of a short-term benefit than long-term because like I've seen in like different classes like people using Chegg for like physics or like my statistics class. And, like they always do well in the homeworks, but then like when it comes to the exams, they like have no idea how to solve the problems. So I think it just ends up coming back to them. But yeah, so it's not a good idea in my opinion to use these tools to cheat like that.
The different assessment methods might help weed some of that out.
Yeah.
Are there any other, and please feel free to ask that question, are you guys worried about that? But like also how can, like as students, what do you think, how can we combat academic integrity issues? Yep, see we go. There you go. Thank you, Wanda. Oh, and Nathan, how would you draw the line between cheating and being helpful? There's so many good questions in the chat. We're never going to get to them all.
I mean, for the ideas on how to address other students cheating, I don't really know because as a student, there's like, snitches get stitches, but then how do you incentivize like telling on somebody else? Like, I mean, in ethically, you're helping them because you want them to learn as much as you want to learn, but then that's almost never the reaction that you're gonna get if you point out that somebody's cheating or using this tool to help them. So yeah, I don't really know. Just I guess focusing on incentivizing students to who call this out anonymously.
And I think someone way back at the beginning of the conversation, someone said, if the assignment is worthwhile to the student, right? If it's important to you, if it's maybe some assignments are more critical to you than other assignments. Any other comments on how do you define cheating? What we can do about it? Are you worried about, other people cheating and getting by and you're not? And what again, like going back to what's the future hold for us? And part of it is this. Mohammed?
I think the cheating is like just directly copy pasting from what the prompt is, and you just copy paste. And I think helping is just taking the idea and just writing it in your own words, because it helps you get out of that writer's block. And I think for like math, you can use like AI to generate exam style problems. Like, let's say you're doing a practice test, but you run out of the practice problem. You can use that to like do like more exam style practice problem, because sometimes the practice problems are like the same on the exam. So you kind of have idea how to solve like every single problem. Like I've used ChatGPT to like generate exam P, like the actuarial exam problem. And I think that was really helpful because you want to do the harder questions on the harder side. So you are more comfortable doing the easy problem on the exam. I think that's really helpful.
Thank you.
I think to the point of how worried we are about other students getting ahead using ChatGPT, or some students don't. I personally am not worried about that because I really see an added benefit to doing the work yourself. Like a lot of times, what students don't realize, or what many students do realize, and why they continue to do assignments without them on different AI platforms, is the kind of thought process. Like a lot of the assignments are meant to teach students how to learn and teach students how to think, rather than the actual quality of the assignments. That doesn't go for every field in education, but in a lot of my classes, that's how it is. So even if some students use AI more heavily than others, I think it's more about like what works best for you, what's more effective to you, as well as what's more beneficial to you.
Thank you.
I think that AI is just like the latest fad. It's just the new kid on the block. I mean, there's there's so many ways already that students find to cheat. I mean, before this, there can be Discord channels. There can be, I mean, simply just using your phone during an exam. I mean, there are so many ways, and I think we need to look at the worst case scenario that AI presents for students in the classroom, and then compare that to what's being done now to stop the current form of cheating, and then we can see where we want to go forward, if AI is really the problem, or if it's how we're teaching our students, or how we're designing the classes. Is the class a learning space, or is it a you need to do this and get a certain grade so you can move on to the next class space? I think defining these or redefining these is kind of the root cause, and AI is just the next branch.
Thank you, Brandon. I love that. Is it a learning space? That's awesome. Thank you. Yep, I think you're right. Megan said, Brandon just did a mic drop. So we have a few more minutes left. I don't know if anyone, I know we've asked a lot of questions in the chat, and I think we've gotten to most of them, but does anyone have a question that we haven't answered yet here today? I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of questions, but anything that well, thank you. Thank you so much to our students. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your knowledge with us. We really do appreciate it. We have, if there's any other questions, please let us know. We're here, obviously. We'll share the slides. The slides have some resources on the back, on the last slide, excuse me. And we have one last event for the semester. I cannot believe that the semester is almost over, but our last event, if anyone is interested, is coming to our our monthly discussion, Teaching in the Age of Generative AI. Just show up. Anyone who comes, we're going to talk about generative AI and teaching and learning. So we really like to do that with people. So please stop by and have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you celebrate. Have a wonderful long weekend. And thank you so much for coming. And thank you, guys.
That's why I teach.
Sorry, Sam. I'm going to stop recording.